some of our witnesses suggest, and some of our members seem to agree, at least in part, that requiring of an identification form, photo ID, is somehow racially discriminatory. It raises all sorts of questions in my mind. Is our entire healthcare system racist? Are pharmacies racist? The airline industry, is that racist? The TSA? What about bars? Go into a bar? I mean, some people consider a form of flattery, I guess, if they get carded, but, it happens, and they're required to ask for IDs. Many of them do as a matter of policy. But universities. One thing I've learned about all colleges and universities these days, they all issue a student ID. They have photos on them. Make sure that the privileges associated with that university aren't being used improperly by someone else. What about Major League Baseball, the NFL, or all other event organizers who require you to show an ID when you go to pick up your tickets? Are they all racist? That would be news to me. It's certainly not racist to require someone to prove who they are in order to gain access to government benefits of one sort or another. It's never been deemed such. So why all of a sudden are we calling it that when people just wanted to vote? Now some people will say on the other side is, this is different. It's the right to vote. We've got to have as many people voting as possible. Well, hang on just a minute. If you don't have some process of verifying that the person is who the person says he or she is, then what happens? Well, what happens is that you have a very significant risk that someone will vote when they're not supposed to, when they're not allowed, or somebody will vote multiple times, perhaps many multiple times. When that happens, you have disenfranchisement. You have disenfranchisement of those who are entitled to vote. So if these things are racist, then that's news to me. And we've got a much bigger problem with all these industries that I've just mentioned. But of course, none of this is true, because this is absolute nonsense. We have the ability, in fact, we have a duty, not we, because we're not the ones who control voting rolls. That is up to the states. The Constitution goes out of its way to make sure that that's up to the states. The states have the obligation, they have the opportunity, they have the duty to make sure that there is confidence in our voting system, and that's why they do it. Mr. Von Spakovsky, H.R. 4, the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act, not only creates updated formulas for jurisdictional preclearance, but it also creates a new form of preclearance triggered by practices that many progressives fear, loathe, in fact. Now, ironically, these practices are widely popular with voters across the political spectrum, right? Which raises all sorts of questions as to progressives might fear them, but let's set that aside for a minute. Because they are popular, and they're popular specifically because they ensure the integrity and the potency and the legitimacy of each ballot. They include, among other things, voter ID requirements and efforts to maintain the integrity of voter registration files, to make sure that someone who has died or moved out of state or otherwise is ineligible to vote in the jurisdiction in question doesn't vote, and thereby disenfranchise those who are entitled to vote in that jurisdiction. How would these practice-based preclearance provisions in H.R. 4 ensure that most, if not all, voting jurisdictions in the United States are forced into the even more burdensome jurisdiction-based preclearance process?
Well, the problem with this practice-based preclearance, particularly the one applied to cleanup of voter rolls, is I know the attitude of the career people inside the voting section. Maureen Reardon has talked about it. And they oppose almost any cleanup of voter rolls, any attempt to make sure they're accurate. And you can see this in all the lawsuits that have been filed. You'll recall that a lawsuit in Ohio went all the way to the Supreme Court, the Husted decision. And
they're neutral, aren't they? You can trust them, can't you?
Yeah, I think so, right. But here's the thing that people forget about this whole claim that somehow maintaining voter registration systems leads to discrimination. First of all, states are strictly regulated in what they can do by the National Voter Registration Act. It sets out very strict rules on what you can do to clean up voter rolls. And second, this constant claim I hear that, cleaning up voter rolls, taking off people who have died or moved away, it disenfranchises voters. Well, that also ignores the fact that this Congress passed in 2002 the Help America Vote Act. In fact, 92 senators voted in favor of it. That put in a provisional balloting provision. So even if a state makes a mistake, they remove somebody from the voter roll because they think they moved out of state and they don't. All that person, when they show up at their polling place and they're told, listen, you're not on the list, we thought you had moved, they are federally entitled to a provisional ballot. They simply have to declare, no, I'm eligible, I was registered. They are given a provisional ballot. Election officials then investigate, and if a mistake was made, their ballot counts. So people are not going to be disenfranchised even if a mistake is made.
Mr. Chairman, I see my time's expired. I've got one follow-up question I'd like to ask Ms. Reardon, if that's okay.
If it's quick, yeah. I should tell the members we have a vote underway right now.
Understood. Ms. Reardon, under Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act, still fully intact regardless of whether this ever becomes law. Any reason why that's inadequate to address these? Is there any argument to be made that the Section 2 violations going on are so rampant, so out of control, as Congress concluded they were at the time of the original passage of Sections 4 and 5, that they can't keep up with this?
I don't believe so. Section 2, especially the way that it has been enlarged to include an effect portion to Section 2, really targets intentional discrimination as well, and that is consistent with Shelby. And so although there's been some testimony here that Section 2 is expensive and it's long, it is certainly within the powers of the 15th Amendment, and it also provides DOJ what it needs, and that is to target areas within the United States that are discriminating, as opposed to making everybody in the United States subject to Section 5 when there's no basis for it. I will say that DOJ, since the Shelby decision, has only brought approximately 6 Section 2 cases, their last one being the one that they filed in Georgia. I would say that's pretty indicative that there's not rampant discrimination within the United States, because DOJ is certainly not there filing lawsuits.
Thank you.
I will yield to Senator Klobuchar for her questions, and she will chair. In my absence, I'm going to go vote, and I'll be running right back. And then if she has to leave and I'm not back, if she can yield too.